Seattle, 3:47 in the morning. The city breathes in its sleep. Rain moves across rooftops. Windows go dark one by one, the way cities exhale when no one is watching. On the fourth floor of a Capitol Hill apartment building, a hallway light is still on. A man sits on the floor, not collapsed, not lost, just there, back against the wall, knees up, eyes open. On the other side of the door, he is not touching. Something moves. Something breathes differently than anything he has heard before. The air in the apartment is warm. Too warm for October. It smells like honeysuckle, like something ancient and impossible pressed into the shape of an ordinary Tuesday night. He knows he should leave. He has been told very clearly to leave. He does not leave. Because somewhere between 8 months of small mornings and this one enormous night, leaving stopped being something he knew how to do. 8 months. That's how long they had been sharing 847 square feet of a converted apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle. 8 months of overlapping schedules and borrowed shampoo, and one very complicated bathroom situation involving Sarah's morning routine, which took exactly 41 minutes and involved sounds Caleb had decided very early on not to investigate. 8 months. And somehow they had figured it out. Not because they planned to, not because the Galactic Exchange Program gave them some kind of manual, because they didn't. Caleb had read every single page of the welcome packet twice, and the closest thing to practical advice it offered was a paragraph about maintaining open channels of intercultural communication, which was bureaucratic language for nobody actually knows how this is supposed to work. So good luck. They figured it out the way most people figure out living together, slowly, painfully, by accident. He had signed the lease on this apartment 10 months before Sarah arrived. Spent the first 2 of those months repainting the kitchen himself, arguing with the landlord about the bathroom exhaust fan, and learning the specific architecture of living alone after a long time of not living alone. The kitchen tile was the wrong shade of cream. He had opinions about this, strong, sustained, unreasonable opinions. The built-in bookshelves in the living room were the single best architectural decision the building's previous owner had ever made, and he loved them with an embarrassing amount of feeling. He had been alone in this apartment for 10 months, and then the program sent him Sarah. The first week was a disaster, not a dramatic disaster. A quiet, grinding, deeply uncomfortable disaster of 2 people who did not know each other trying to share a coffee maker at 7 a.m. Caleb learned on day 2 that Sarah did not drink coffee. She had tried it once, found it, in her words, aggressively bitter for no reason, and moved on with her life. What she drank instead was something she brewed from small dried leaves she kept in a sealed container in the back of the cabinet. It smelled like jasmine and old wood and something else entirely, something Caleb's brain kept trying to name and kept failing. She made it every morning at exactly 6. He found out about this because he woke up at 6:15 on day 3 and walked into the kitchen half asleep and found her standing at the counter with her back to him, very tall and very still in the early dark. And he had embarrassingly made a sound. Not a word, not a sentence. A sound. Like air leaving a tire. Sarah turned, looked at him. Her eyes in the dim kitchen light were silver. Not gray, silver. Like the underside of a cloud right before it breaks open. Like something lit from within by a source that had no human equivalent. "You are awake early," she said. "I live here," he said, which was not in retrospect his finest conversational moment. She turned back to her tea. He made coffee. They stood 3 feet apart in silence for 4.5 minutes. He counted, because counting was something to do that was not staring at the way the light caught her hair, which was the color of early autumn wheat, and moved with a kind of slow, deliberate weight, like it existed at a slightly different gravity than the rest of the world. He did not stare. He counted. 47 seconds. 48. 49. He poured his coffee. She poured her tea. He went back to his room. She stayed at the window. That was day 3. By week 3, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not in any way Caleb could have pointed to and explained. It was more like the apartment itself had quietly rearranged itself around both of them. There was a second cup on the counter now every morning. Tea, not coffee. She made it without asking. He started drinking it without commenting. It tasted like nothing he had a word for, and it was the best thing he had consumed at 6 in the morning in the 2 years of solitude that preceded her arrival. He stopped locking the hallway bathroom when he was just brushing his teeth. She stopped waiting at her door for 3 silent minutes before entering the kitchen. Small things, so small they were barely worth mentioning, except that they weren't small at all. Because small things are the architecture of how two people learn to exist in the same space without erasing each other. And Caleb, who had spent 2 years in apartments alone across 3 different cities, who had forgotten what it felt like to hear another person moving around in the next room in the morning, was discovering something he hadn't let himself name. He had been very, very lonely. He just hadn't let himself notice. Sarah noticed everything. That was the thing about her that took him longest to get used to. Not her height, which was considerable. Not her eyes. Not the way she occasionally tilted her head at an angle no human neck should comfortably achieve when she was processing something unexpected. All of that weirdly normalized faster than he expected. The brain adapts. The brain is embarrassingly good at deciding something is normal once it sees it enough times. What didn't normalize was her attention. She watched things, not in a creepy way, in the way of someone who is genuinely, completely, almost reverently interested in the world around her. She watched pigeons on the fire escape with the same focused intensity she brought to watching Caleb try to explain why a client's rebrand was a catastrophic mistake. She watched the rain hit the window. She watched the way steam moved above a pot of water. She watched Caleb's hands when he was working his stylus moving across his tablet, and she would sometimes say nothing for a long time, and then say something like, "You hold your breath when you're deciding." He did. He had never known that about himself. "How long have you," he started once. "Since the 3rd week," she said, which was again unsettling, and also the most seen he had felt by another person in a long time. They did not become friends. That's not the right word. Friends is a word for something you build deliberately. This was more like they became fluent in each other, without meaning to, without choosing to. The way you become fluent in the sounds of a house and its specific creaks and water pressure, and the exact pitch of the 3rd step on the stairs. You don't decide to learn it. You just live there long enough and one day you realize you know it. The knowledge has been accumulating in you the entire time without permission. He knew the sound of her footsteps and could tell without looking up if she was tired or thinking hard or moving toward the kitchen for the 3rd time, which meant she was procrastinating on something. She knew when he had a deadline because his coffee mug count tripled and he stopped answering texts from anyone who wasn't the client. He knew that she hated the sound of the building's garbage collection truck and would go still and quiet for exactly 90 seconds after it passed processing. She knew that he talked to his plants when he thought no one could hear, and that it wasn't embarrassment that made him stop when she walked by. It was something else. Neither of them named that something else. 8 months of small knowing. 8 months of parallel orbits slowly and visibly, unstoppably drawing closer. And then one morning, Caleb woke up and the apartment smelled different. He couldn't explain it at first. He lay in bed for a moment with the ceiling above him and the familiar gray Seattle light coming through the curtains, and he thought something is wrong with the building, or someone left something on, and then he actually breathed it in. And wrong was not the word. It wasn't wrong. It was sweet, intensely, disorientingly sweet, like honeysuckle and warm stone, and something else beneath both of those things, something with an edge to it, something that reached into the back of his skull and pressed down on a part of his brain he didn't know he had. He sat up. He looked at the clock, 8:47 a.m., which meant Sarah had already been awake for almost 3 hours, which was normal. What was not normal was that he couldn't hear her. No footsteps, no sound from the kitchen, no quiet movement through the apartment that he had stopped noticing because he had come to count on it the way you count on a clock ticking. It was only when it stopped that you realized how much you had been listening. He got up. He put on the kettle because his hands needed something to do. He looked at the hallway. Her door was closed, not unusual. Her door was often closed, but there was something about the closed door this morning that felt different. He could not have said why, just that it did. He made his coffee. He sat down at his desk. He opened his laptop and stared at the half-finished logo project he was supposed to have delivered yesterday and did not see it at all because the smell was still there. Softer now, but still there. Like music in the next building over. Present enough to register. Distant enough to make you strain toward it. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, which was already strange because they almost never texted each other inside the apartment. The apartment was small enough that talking was faster, and they had both learned fairly early that the other person found shouting through doors only slightly less awkward than they did. It said, "Caleb, please find somewhere else to stay for the next 10 days. I am sorry. I will explain when I can." He read it twice. He looked at her closed door. He typed back, "Are you okay?" 3 minutes passed. He counted. Because counting. "Then I will be. But I need you to not be here." He read that sentence 4 times and became increasingly confused by it with each reading. He needed to not be here. He looked around the apartment, which was his apartment. Technically, his name was on the lease. He had lived in Seattle for 3 years, signed this specific lease 22 months ago, spent the first 10 months here alone, and then spent 8 months sharing it with a 7-foot alien who made excellent tea and occasionally alarmed the neighbors by standing on the fire escape at 4 a.m. watching meteor showers. This was his apartment, and she was asking him to not be in it for 10 days. He grabbed his phone. He was reasonable. He was an adult. He understood that sometimes situations required flexibility and accommodation and the kind of generosity that cost you something real. He called Danny. Danny's voicemail told him Danny was in Portland until next Thursday. Unavailable. He called his cousin Marcus, who had a couch. Marcus's wife answered and in the kindest possible voice explained that they had just brought home their second baby and the couch was currently functioning as a burp cloth storage facility. He opened 3 hotel booking apps. He stared at the results. Every hotel in a 15-mile radius of Capitol Hill was booked. Full, not almost full. Full, because of the Pacific Rim Technology Summit, which he knew about in the abstract way. You know about things that don't affect your life until suddenly, catastrophically, they do. 7,000 attendees, 312 exhibit booths, and apparently not one single room in the greater Seattle metropolitan area. He tried Airbnb. He tried VRBO. He tried calling the one friend he had from college who still lived in the area, only to learn that friend had very recently moved to Denver and had just been too awkward about it to mention. He put his phone down. He looked at her door. He picked his phone back up and typed, "I've called everyone I know. Everything is booked because of the conference. I'm trying, but I don't have anywhere to go." What is happening? A long pause this time. A pause long enough that he made himself another cup of coffee and drank half of it and put the kettle back on. Then her reply came. Just one word. Wait. He waited. 15 minutes passed. 20. The smell was stronger now somehow. It had moved from background to foreground in the way a sound moves when a room gets quieter. He hadn't noticed the room getting quieter. His door. 3 soft knocks. He opened it. Sarah was standing in the hallway and she looked wrong. Not sick, not injured, but something was happening in her face that he didn't have a frame for. A kind of tension he had never seen in her before, and he had seen her work through complex translation problems in real time and hold completely still for 10 minutes when the neighbor's dog escaped into the hallway. This was different. This was a tension that went all the way down. Her eyes had changed. The silver was gone, replaced by something deeper. Slate. Storm water. The color of a sea before weather arrives. May I come in? She said. Not quite a question. He stepped back. She came in and stood in the middle of his room. He noticed abstractly and helplessly that the smell was stronger near her. Much stronger. Like the difference between hearing music through a wall and standing next to the speaker. Sit down, she said. He sat. She remained standing because Sarah, in a difficult conversation, was a person who needed to be vertical and also possibly to pace what she did. 2 steps left, turn. 2 steps right, turn. I have to tell you something, she said. Okay. I knew about this 3 weeks ago. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Knew about what? She stopped pacing. My species has a physiological cycle. It occurs once every 3 years. It is not dangerous in and of itself, but it requires certain conditions to manage safely. One of those conditions is the absence of close proximity to someone with whom I have developed what my people call resonance. He was following this. He was absolutely following this. And simultaneously, his brain was doing something it did when confronted with information that was too large. It was translating into smaller pieces, breaking it down, physiological cycle, once every 3 years. Sarah, I requested a different housing arrangement, she said, and her voice was careful in the way of someone who is working very hard to keep it that way. 3 times. The program denied all 3 requests. Budget allocation. They cited budget allocation. Something moved through his chest, slow and heavy. You've been trying to handle this for 3 weeks. Yes. By yourself. Yes. Why didn't you just tell me? She looked at him then, really looked at him, and her eyes, he realized, had shifted darker still. Something in them he couldn't map to any expression he recognized. Because if I created a problem for the program, they would send me home. And she stopped. And then very quietly, I did not want to go home. He did not ask why. Not yet. Because there was something in her voice when she said it that told him why was a door that led to a long hallway and they were already standing in a flood. Okay, he said. Okay, so you've been trying to find solutions for 3 weeks and nothing worked and now it has begun, she said. The cycle, it started this morning. The smell, that was the smell. Right, he said. So what do you need? She looked at him with an expression he did not entirely understand. I need you to not be here, Caleb. I explained this. I know, but everywhere is booked. I've tried everything. There is genuinely nowhere for me to go. He held up his phone with the search results open. 17 hotels, 43 Airbnbs, all of them carrying a variation of the same 2 words. Not available. She looked at the screen, something crossed her face. I see, she said. So what are the options, he said. There have to be options. Tell me what we're working with. She was quiet for a moment, long enough that the sound of the building came back. The traffic outside, the faint rattle of the window in the upper left corner that neither of them had ever gotten around to fixing. The cycle can be managed, she said finally, if I maintain sufficient mental focus and minimize external stimulation. We would both need to remain in our separate rooms. No contact, no shared space, no presence. For 10 days. 10 days in our rooms. With a system for the bathroom and kitchen. We coordinate, we take turns. We do not see each other. He thought about this. It was absurd. It was also the only plan currently available. That sounds miserable, he said, but I can do it. There is one more thing. She said it like it cost her something. The pheromones I am producing during this cycle, they will affect you. The effects vary by individual, but they will be present. You may notice. She stopped again, chose her next words with the kind of care you use for something fragile. You may notice that your thoughts are less clear than usual, that concentration is more difficult, that you are more aware of my presence in the apartment even when you cannot see me. This is normal. It will pass when the cycle ends." He nodded. "I can handle that." She looked at him with something in her eyes he couldn't name. "I know you will try." She went back to her room. He heard the door close. Not a slam. A controlled, careful, deliberate click. He sat in his room. He breathed in. Sweet. Still there. He pulled up his client file and stared at the logo and did not see it. Day one passed. Surprisingly, day one passed. He stayed in his room. He ordered delivery and left the bag at the front door for her first, then picked his up when she texted Clear. He worked, or tried to. The smell was consistent, a low, constant presence in the apartment that he was getting used to the way you get used to a sound. You're aware of it, and then for a while you're not. And then you're aware of it again stronger, and you remember. He texted her at dinner time. She texted back. Full sentences, a little stilted, but present. He fell asleep at 11, slept well enough. Day two was harder. He didn't know why exactly. The smell was the same. The arrangement was the same. But somewhere around 2 p.m., he found himself standing in the kitchen getting his third coffee of the day, and he realized he was listening. Not for anything specific, just listening. For her. The way you listen for something you're used to hearing and have suddenly stopped. He went back to his room. He worked. He delivered the logo project. He got a polite email from the client saying they wanted something bolder. He sat with the particular, specific frustration of that for 20 minutes and then began again. By 10 p.m., he had finished a second project and rewritten the client email 5 times to remove escalating levels of sarcasm and sent the 6th draft, which was very professional, and made no mention of what bolder actually means because nobody knows what bolder actually means. It is not a useful art direction word. It is a word people use when they know they don't like something but don't know why. He was fine. He was completely fine. Day 3 was the day the sounds started. Not dramatic sounds, not alarming exactly, more like wrong, out of place. The sound of something heavy being moved at 3 a.m. A low sound he couldn't categorize. Not crying, not exactly, but something with the same quality as crying. Something that lived in the same emotional register. He lay in the dark and listened and pressed both hands flat against his mattress. "Don't go in," she said, "don't go in." She was clear. She was very clear. He did not go in. But at 3:47 a.m., he got up. He walked to her door. He stood there for a moment in the hallway with the smell so dense around him he could almost see it. And then he sat down on the floor with his back against the wall beside her door and stayed there. Not inside, not knocking, just there. He fell asleep sometime around 4:30 and woke up stiff and cold with his head against the wall and her door still closed. He texted her that morning, "Are you okay? I was up last night." She took 11 minutes. "I am managing. It is more difficult than previous cycles. Please stay in your room, Caleb." He typed back, "Okay. I'm here if you need anything." He meant the word here in both its meanings, and he understood sitting there rereading the text that she probably did too. Day 4. The apartment was hotter. That was the first thing he noticed. Not uncomfortable, but warmer than it should have been given that it was October in Seattle, and he definitely hadn't adjusted the thermostat. He stood in the kitchen in his t-shirt and sweats getting cereal and trying to remember if he'd paid the heating bill, and then stopped because this wasn't the heating. He knew it wasn't the heating. He ate his cereal. He texted her for the bathroom. She confirmed clear. He brushed his teeth. He passed her closed door on the way back and stopped. It was cracked, not open, not enough to see through, just cracked. That was not the arrangement. The arrangement was doors closed. Doors closed was the deal. He stared at the crack. He texted her, "Sarah, your door." No response. He waited. 30 seconds. A minute. "Sarah." He said it out loud quietly, almost to himself. A sound from inside. Not words. He put his hand on the door. Don't. She said don't. She was extremely specific. He pushed the door open. The smell hit him like stepping from shade into full sun, like the difference between hearing about something and standing inside it. He took a breath and his head swam once briefly and then steadied, and he saw her. She was on the floor, not collapsed, not unconscious, but on the floor by the bed, on her hands and knees, her head down, her hair loose and tumbled forward over her face. Her skin, which was normally the even white of winter light, had flushed deep, rose gold, almost luminous, and she was trembling. A fine constant trembling, like a high string vibrating after the bow has passed. "I told you to stay out," she said. Her voice was different, lower, rougher, like something with texture. "I know," he said. He was not moving toward her, but he was not moving back either. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and his chest did something complicated. "Go back to your room, Caleb. You left your door open. That was a mistake. Please." "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you sure? Because from where I'm standing, I know what it looks like." She lifted her head then, and he saw her eyes. They were dark, red dark, the silver gone almost completely replaced with something that made his nervous system deliver a very clear and unambiguous advisory. And still he did not step back, which was information, which was he would realize later the most important piece of information in this entire situation. He just didn't understand it yet. "Your presence is making it worse," she said. "My body knows you are here, Caleb. The pheromones respond to proximity. They intensify. You need to leave, now." "Okay," he said. "I'm going to leave. I will go directly to my room. But first, I need to know you are physically safe." "I am not in danger." "That's not quite the same thing as safe." She made a sound, low and frustrated, and then after a long moment, "I am not in immediate danger. This is physiologically normal for my species. It is painful, and it is unpleasant, and it is manageable." Manageable? "I have done this before." Something in how she said that, the particular weight of before. He filed it. He would come back to it. "Okay," he said. "Good, I'm going." He took one step back. "Caleb." He stopped. She was still on the floor, still trembling. Her hair fell across her face and she didn't push it back. "Thank you," she said, "for trying." He stood there a second longer than he needed to. "Don't thank me. I walked into your room after you told me not to." "You checked on me," she said. "That is not nothing." He went back to his room. He sat on the edge of his bed and put his hands on his knees and looked at the floor. Okay. She was fine. She was not in immediate danger. She had done this before. She was managing. He was fine. His head was completely clear, which was itself strange, because she had told him the pheromones would affect his thinking. She had said concentration would be harder, that his thoughts would be less clear, and his thoughts were completely clear. Uncomfortably, precisely, embarrassingly clear. He was aware that this was wrong. He was aware that the expected response to what was in that hallway was not clarity. It was not calm concern and steady observation. He knew enough about the Calvary physiological data in the exchange program. Pamphlets 3 paragraphs deeply insufficient. Whoever wrote them should be embarrassed to know that pheromone response in non-Calvary species ran a specific and well-documented course. Disorientation, loss of fine motor coordination, heightened emotional volatility. He had none of those things. He had a headache faintly, and a very strong awareness of exactly where she was in the apartment, as if she were a sound he could triangulate without trying. But his hands were steady, and his thinking was sequential, and he was, as far as he could tell, entirely himself, which meant something. He didn't know what yet. He pulled up the Galactic Exchange Program's Supplemental Species Information Database, which he had never fully read because it was 340 pages long and organized with an impressive absence of logic, and he searched for Calvary, physiological cycle, pheromone. Non-Calvary response. He read for a long time. Outside Seattle moved through its afternoon. Rain came, stopped. The light changed, changed again. He read. And at some point, sitting in his room with the smell of her and the rain against the glass, and the database open on his screen, something clicked into place. Like a key. Like a key that had been in a lock for 8 months. Resonance compatibility. The database said in the clunky technical prose of something translated from a language that did not originally exist in text, is a rare phenomenon documented in approximately 3.8% of cross-species Calvary contact. It manifests as mutual calibration of neurological and biochemical responses building gradually over sustained proximity. In cases of high resonance compatibility, a preliminary bond may form prior to any deliberate activation event, such as a physiological cycle. The presence of a preliminary bond fundamentally alters pheromone response in the compatible individual. Instead of disorientation, the individual experiences heightened clarity, increased calm, a precise awareness of the Calvary individual's location and emotional state. He set his phone down. He picked it up again. He put it face down on the desk. His heart was doing something complicated. Okay. So the reason he wasn't losing his mind in the hallway was not because he was unusually calm or unusually rational or had some kind of exceptional resistance to pheromone compounds. The reason was that something had already happened between him and Sarah, something that had nothing to do with this week or this door or this crisis, something that had apparently been happening for the better part of 8 months. While he was counting seconds in the kitchen on day 3, while she was watching his hands when he worked, while they were building small habits that neither of them named, he sat with this for a very long time. Through the 6 p.m. hour and the 7 p.m. hour, and the first part of the 8 p.m. hour, when rain came back harder and the window rattled in its frame and the apartment settled around him in its familiar, specific way. Then he got up. He walked to her door. He knocked 3 times, measured. Sarah. Silence. Then, I can hear you breathing. I know, I need to tell you something. I need you to stay away from me. I know that too. I read the database. He stopped, tried again. I read the part about resonance compatibility. A longer silence this time, and then something shifted in the air on the other side of the door. He couldn't have said how he knew that. He just did. How long, she said. Her voice was quieter now. Careful. I don't know exactly. The database didn't have a timeline. That is not what I was asking. He understood. I don't know, he said honestly. A while, I didn't have a name for it. A pause, then very quietly. Neither did I. He leaned his forehead against the door. Just for a second. Just to have something solid. So that's why it's worse, he said. Being near me. Not because I'm a stranger, because I'm... He stopped. Didn't have the word. The opposite of a stranger. Yes, and that's why the pheromones aren't affecting me the normal way. Yes, Sarah. He straightened, took a breath. You don't have to get through this alone. I know you know that. I know you've been thinking about it. And I know you're going to tell me it's too much to ask and I shouldn't. And there are risks and... There are risks, she said. And there was something in her voice now that was not the forced calm of control. Something with weight underneath it. Something old. You don't fully understand what you are saying. So tell me what I'm saying. Silence. Not tonight, she said finally. Tonight go to your room. I need to think. He stood there another moment. He could feel her almost. 3 inches of door between them, and he could feel the exact shape of where she was on the other side. Okay, he said. I'll go. He went. He sat back down on the edge of his bed. His room was dark now. He hadn't turned on the light. Outside, Seattle glittered through the rain. Red and gold and white smearing across the wet glass, everything softened and doubled and more. He thought about day 3 of the first week. The kitchen, 6:15 a.m., the silver light, the sound that came out of him when he turned and saw her. He thought about every morning since then. The tea, the ticking of knowing someone's footsteps, the unspoken exchange of knowing and being known. He thought about what it meant that none of that had been accidental, or rather it had been accidental in the most important sense. Neither of them had planned it. Neither of them had chosen it deliberately. It had grown the way things grow in the dark, slow and quiet, and certain without anyone deciding that it should. You don't decide to know someone. You just do. And then one morning you wake up and the evidence is everywhere. In every small thing, in every cup of tea, in every light left on or turned off. In every time you sat on the floor of a hallway because you couldn't walk away and you couldn't go in, and so you found the third option. You just stayed. His phone lit up on the desk. A text from Sarah. "Come back to the door," it said. "I will tell you what you are saying." He got up. He walked back down the hallway. The smell was still there. Constant. Present. Not overwhelming. Just there. He sat down on the floor in front of her door, his back against the wall, his knees up, the same position as 3:47 a.m. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said from the other side. And she began to talk. She talked for a long time. Not all of it made sense to him right away. Some of it he had to hold in pieces, turn over slowly, wait for the shape to emerge the way a photograph develops in a darkroom. Patient. Gradual. Then suddenly all at once, she told him about resonance. Not the database version, her version. The way it was explained to Calvary children before they were old enough to understand what it meant. The way her grandmother had described it sitting in a garden on Eos, where the light came from 2 directions at once, and everything cast double shadows. She said resonance was not love. Not exactly. It was more like recognition, the cellular kind, the kind that happens below the level of decision. 2 systems encountering each other and finding without consultation, without permission, that they already know the frequency. "It takes time to build," she said through the door. "Usually months, in rare cases longer. It is not dramatic. There is no moment. You do not feel it happen. You simply find one day that it has already happened, that it has been happening." He was quiet. "I noticed something," she continued carefully, "around the 5th month. A shift in how I processed your presence. Not discomfort, the opposite, a kind of settling, as if some internal calibration I had been running continuously had finally found its reference point and stopped." He thought about that. He thought about the 5th month. He had been deep in a rebranding project for a client who changed their mind every 4 days. Stressed and behind and surviving on terrible amounts of coffee and the particular grim determination of someone who has promised something they are no longer sure they can deliver. And Sarah had, without comment, started leaving food in the kitchen on the evenings she could tell he hadn't eaten. Nothing elaborate. Soup, bread. Once inexplicably, a perfectly assembled sandwich that he had eaten in 3 minutes, standing over the sink and then felt vaguely emotional about for reasons he didn't examine. The 5th month. "You were making me lunch," he said. "I was ensuring you were functional," she said. "That is the most Sarah sentence you have ever said." A pause and then muffled through the door something that might have been the smallest possible laugh. "Perhaps," she said. He shifted on the floor. His back was starting to ache. He was 32 years old and already his back made opinions known about hardwood floors. He ignored it. "So the bond formed over the 5th, 6th, 7th month." "Approximately." "And then your cycle started." "Yes. And because the preliminary bond was already there, being near me makes the cycle more intense." "Significantly." "But also," he stopped, reread the logic. The preliminary bond means I'm not affected by the pheromones the normal way, because my nervous system has already been calibrated to yours. Silence. You read the database carefully, she said. I had time. Yes. A beat. That is correct. You are not at risk of the standard pheromone effects. Disorientation, loss of judgment, the heightened volatility. So when you told me to leave, when you kept telling me it was dangerous for me to be near you, you meant the cycle intensity, not the pheromone effects. A very long pause. Yes, he let that land. So she had been trying to protect herself, not him, or rather she had been protecting herself by making him believe she was protecting him, which was a choice, a very deliberate, very Sarah choice. I'm not mad, he said. I did not ask. I know, I'm telling you anyway. I'm not mad, but I want you to know that I knew something was wrong and I was going to stay regardless. I know, she said, and her voice was different now, the roughness still there. But underneath it, something softer, something that had been there for a long time and had just stopped pretending it wasn't. That is what frightens me about you, Caleb. You always stay. He didn't have an answer for that, so he just sat there in the hallway, in the dark, in the smell of her, and let the silence be what it was. After a while, she said, "Go to sleep. We will talk more tomorrow." He went, except he didn't sleep for a long time, because something in how she said it. That is what frightens me about you. Not worries, not concerns, frightens. He stared at the ceiling and thought about that word until sometime around 2 a.m., when sleep finally made the decision for him. Day 5. The system continued. Text for bathroom. Food left in shifts. The apartment felt different now, though. Something had changed in it. Not the smell, which was constant. Something in the texture of the silence. It was less empty somehow. Fuller. Like the difference between a room no one is in and a room where someone is just around the corner. He actually worked this time, finished 2 projects, started a third, sent the sarcasm-free revision of the client email, and got a response saying the new direction was much bolder, thank you. Which, fine, whatever. Bold, great. At 2 p.m., he left a bowl of soup outside her door. The kind she had told him once she found most tolerable, which was any kind without what she called aggressive earthen notes, which had taken him 2 weeks and 6 failed attempts to translate into actual grocery store decisions. Chicken noodle, low sodium, no celery. He knocked twice. Soup's out here. A long pause, then, you remembered about the celery. You made a very specific face the first time. Another pause, longer. Thank you, Caleb. He went back to his room. He sat at his desk and stared at his screen for a while without seeing it, and understood with the particular helplessness of someone who has just grasped something they cannot ungrasp that he had been making choices about her for months. Small ones, but choices. Soup without celery, tea on the counter, music in the evenings when the silence ran long. He had been making these choices continuously automatically because somewhere along the way her comfort had become a thing he tracked without deciding to. A background process running constantly. He just hadn't looked at it directly. He was looking now, and the looking was a lot. Day 5 also brought Dot. He heard the knock at 3:15 p.m. 3 deliberate raps, a pause, then one more. Not uncertain, not aggressive. The knock of someone who has decided to knock and means it. He opened the door. Dorothea Winslow was standing in the hallway in her good coat. Not her everyday coat, the tan one she wore to check the mail. Her good coat, charcoal gray wool with square buttons. She was carrying a covered pot in a paper bag and looking at him with the steady, uncomplicated gaze of a woman who has seen most things and formed opinions about all of them. I brought soup, she said. We have soup, he said. I brought better soup. She looked past him into the apartment. Her nose moved slightly, just once. Then she looked back at him. Are you going to let me in? He stepped back. She came in the way she always moved through spaces, deliberate, no wasted motion. She had been a nurse for 38 years, and it showed in how she occupied a room, like someone who knew exactly where the exits were and exactly where the pain was coming from and had a plan for both. She set the pot on the stove, looked around the apartment, looked at Sarah's closed door for a moment without expression, then turned to Caleb. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She sat across from him, folded her hands on her knees, looked at him with those steady, unreadable gray eyes. "How long has it been?" she said. "5 days." "And how is she?" "Managing." He paused. "I think," she says, "managing. And how are you?" He opened his mouth, closed it. There was something about the directness of the question, the way Dot asked it without any of the softening people usually wrap around hard questions. It caught him flat-footed. "I'm fine," he said. "That's not what I asked." He looked at her. "I asked how you are," she said. "Not whether you're functioning, not whether the logistics are under control. How you are." And that was just unfair. That was an ambush. He had been managing perfectly well for 5 days by the simple method of not asking himself that question. And here was Dot Winslow in her good coat dismantling that approach in less than 60 seconds. "I don't know," he said finally. She nodded like that was the right answer. "Tell me what you're doing." "Trying to help." "With what specifically?" "With," he gestured vaguely at the apartment, "with all of it. The food, the system, being here so she doesn't have to be alone." Dot was quiet for a moment. "And who's doing that for you?" He stared at her. "There's nobody," he said. "There doesn't need to be. I'm not the one going through something." "Everyone goes through something," she said. "Most people just have company while they do it." She tilted her head slightly. "You're in this apartment. You can't leave. You're managing a situation that nobody prepared you for, and every instinct you have is oriented outward, toward her." She paused. "When do you point any of it inward?" He didn't have an answer for that. Because the truth was, he didn't. He never had, not really, since his mother's illness when he was 19. Since learning at an age when most people were still figuring out how to do their own laundry, that love was something you did not, something you received. That the way you made yourself necessary was by being the one who didn't need anything. He had gotten very good at that, very efficient. "My husband was like you," Dot said. She said it simply, not cruelly, not as a diagnosis, just a fact. Leonard, 43 years, he would have organized the crisis on a spreadsheet before he let himself feel it. A small smile, there and gone. "It took me about 12 years to realize he wasn't being strong. He was just scared that if he stopped doing, he would have to feel. And feeling was harder," Caleb said, "much harder." She looked at him steadily. "I want to ask you something. You don't have to answer." "Okay. Are you staying in this apartment right now because you want to, or because you don't know how to not stay?" The question landed like a stone dropped in water. He felt the rings moving outward from it, all the way out to the edges of things. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He thought about the hallway at 3:47 a.m., the floor against his back. The decision he had not consciously made but had simply found himself inside of the way you sometimes find yourself standing in a room with no memory of walking there. "Both," he said. "I think both, but I'm trying to figure out if that matters." Dot held his gaze. "It matters," she said. "But here's the thing about both. Both isn't weakness. Both is honest." She stood up. "The soup needs about 20 minutes on low." She picked up her bag. "I'm downstairs if you need anything. And when she's better, send her down. I have questions." She let herself out. He sat there for a long time. Then he went to Sarah's door and knocked softly. "Dot brought soup. Better soup, allegedly. Do you want some?" A pause. "Yes," Sarah said. "Actually, yes." He left it at her door. He heard her door open and close. He went back to his room, and for the first time in 5 days, he sat on his bed and just breathed, not managing anything, not tracking anything, just present in his own chest for a moment. It was uncomfortable. He did it anyway. Day 6 passed. Day 7. The hours had taken on a different texture by now, less like surviving and more like something else, something he didn't have a good word for. The two of them existed in the apartment like two weather systems, parallel and aware, and profoundly entangled without touching. They texted more, not logistics only, real conversations, strange ones. The kind that happen between people who have run out of small talk and can't get out of the room and so end up almost accidentally in the deep water. She told him about Eos, not the tourist version, the real version. The way the second sun made everything on the eastern continent glow copper in the late afternoon. The specific silence of her family's house in the weeks before a major gathering when everyone was in transit from different places and the house held the anticipation of arrival. The food she missed, an untranslatable word for the feeling of coming home from a long journey and smelling something familiar cooking. He told her about his mother. He hadn't talked about that in a long time. The specific mathematics of a sick parent and an 18-year-old who didn't know how to ask for help. How he had discovered early that being useful was the only emotion that didn't make everything worse. And how somewhere in the years that followed useful had become the whole of him. "You are more than useful," she said, through the door into the dark. "I know that," he said, "technically, but not really." "Not really," he agreed. A pause. "I understand that more than you think." He waited. "On Eos," she said slowly, "my family has a name, a position. There are expectations that come with that, ways of being, and my way of being was—" She stopped, started again. "I was always the one who was fine, the one who managed, the one the others came to." Another pause. "It becomes a kind of armor. You do not notice you are wearing it until it gets too heavy to carry." He leaned his head against the door. "How heavy is it right now?" he asked. Very long silence. "Very," she said, barely a whisper. He put his hand flat against the wood, didn't push, just rested it there. On the other side a sound, not a word, more like a breath that had been held for a very long time finally released. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't do anything." "You stayed," she said. "Caleb, you just stayed." Which was the most and the least he had done. And somehow, impossibly, it was enough. Day 8. He woke up to his phone ringing. Not a text, a call. From Sarah's contact in the exchange program, an administrative number he had saved under bureaucracy because he had at the time found that funny. He answered. The voice on the other end was not administrative. It was older, formal in a different way. The cadence of someone who rarely speaks in their second or third language, but does so with absolute precision. "Mr. Reeves," the voice said, "my name is Vocera. I am Sarah's mother." He sat up very fast, immediately wide awake in the way that adrenaline accomplishes what coffee cannot. "Yes," he said, "I apologize for the hour. I am calling because I have become aware of the situation you and my daughter are currently in, and I need to speak with you directly." A pause, without Sarah present. "She doesn't know you're calling." "No." He thought about that. Thought about what Sarah had told him through a door in the dark about armor and expectations and being the one who was always fine. "Okay," he said. "I'm listening." Vocera spoke for 6 minutes. He did not interrupt. The information came in layers. First layer, the resonance bond between him and Sarah was not preliminary. Not anymore. It had progressed during the cycle to what the Kelvari called a completed bond. Full bilateral resonance. Not partial, not provisional. He absorbed this, set it aside, waited. Second layer, a completed bond between a Calvari and a non-Calvari had occurred twice in recorded history. In the first case, the non-Calvari individual had adapted successfully over a period of months. In the second case, Avasara said the individual did not lose function, not immediately, but over time the bond drew on physiological resources. The individual's biology was not designed to sustain. There was a gradual erosion of self, of coherence, like a candle, a pause like she was choosing the word with great care, like a candle burning from both ends simultaneously. The light is very bright, and then it is gone. He was quiet for a long moment. What are the odds, he said. Of which outcome? Of the bad one. Another pause. In known cases, the ratio is 1-to-1. One survived, one did not. She said it very steadily. Not cruelly, just clearly. The way a person who loves someone tells a hard truth. But I must tell you also that the known cases are limited. There are almost certainly outcomes we have not recorded. I cannot give you a probability. I can only give you the history. Right, he said. He held it. He should have been frightened. He should have felt the floor drop out. That was the reasonable response. A 50-50 chance of losing himself slowly over months or years, like a signal degrading in static. He thought about Dot's question. Are you staying because you want to, or because you don't know how to not stay? He thought about his answer. Both, but I'm trying to figure out if that matters. Both still felt true, and both still felt like maybe the beginning of an honest answer rather than the whole of it. Why are you telling me this, he said. Because Vasara said after a moment, Sarah will not tell you. She will find a way to make it less frightening than it is. She will protect you from the full weight of the information. It is who she is. Another pause. And because you deserve to make an informed choice, whatever that choice is. He thought about that. Does she know about the risk? She has always known, since she was old enough to understand the history. He stared at the wall. She knew what a completed bond could mean. And she did not intend for the bond to form, Vasara said quietly. I want you to understand that. No Calvari controls resonance. It is not a decision. It is a recognition. She did not choose this. And when she realized what was happening, she tried to prevent it. The request to change housing, the insistence that you leave, all of it was protection, he said. Yes. He breathed in, breathed out. Thank you for calling, he said. Mr. Reeves. A pause, very deliberate. Take care of yourself. Whatever you decide, take care of yourself first. She ended the call. He sat in his room in the gray Seattle morning and looked at the wall. Okay. So, just to be clear about the situation, he and Sarah had formed a resonance bond over 8 months of soup and tea and not staring and sitting on floors. That bond had completed during the cycle, and the completion of that bond carried with it a historical risk he had not been fully informed about until approximately 4 minutes ago. Fine. Great. Totally fine situation. No notes. He put his phone down. He picked it up. He put it down again. He got up and walked to her door and stood there. He knocked. Sarah? Yes. Her voice was different today. Calmer. The roughness still present, but the trembling beneath it quieter. Day 8. The cycle was moving through its phases. I need to tell you something. And I need you to not apologize while I tell you. A pause. That is a concerning qualifier. Your mother called me. Complete silence. Long enough that he started to wonder if she had somehow stopped breathing. Sarah. I heard you. She told me about the risk, the bond risk, the historical cases. He waited. She told me you already knew. More silence. The apartment held itself around them. The rain against the glass, the faint rattle of the window, then her voice, very quiet, very controlled, and underneath the control, something cracking. I was going to tell you. When? When it was... She stopped. When I could find a way to tell you that didn't make it sound like what it is. Which is what? Dangerous, she said. Potentially, historically, for you. He leaned against the wall beside her door, slid down it until he was on the floor again. Same position. Always the same position. Maybe the floor was just where he thought most clearly. You have known this since before any of this started. You have been carrying it the whole time. Yes. And you kept trying to make me leave. Yes. And when I wouldn't, I kept trying to minimize the risk, she said. The distance. Everything I asked you to do was an attempt to slow the bond's progression before it completed. But it completed anyway. Yes. He was quiet. She was quiet. And then, through the door in a voice stripped of everything but the core of something real. I am sorry, Caleb. I did not want this for you. I never wanted this for you. You were supposed to leave. You were supposed to find somewhere else to stay, and you were supposed to be far enough away that the residents couldn't... She stopped. I planned for you to leave. I know, he said. You were never supposed to be sitting on the floor outside my door at every hour of the night. You were never supposed to be in this. I know that too. Then why? Her voice broke slightly. Just slightly. The smallest fracture. Why are you still here? He thought about his mother, about useful, about the specific archaeology of who he had become and why. He thought about Dot's question and his answer. He thought about the most honest version of himself, not the efficient version, not the capable version, the actual one, the one sitting on hardwood floors in the middle of a situation nobody prepared him for, the one who had been accumulating knowledge of another person for 8 months without noticing because the noticing would have required looking directly at what was happening. Because, he said, I want to be. A long silence. Not just because I don't know how to leave, he continued. I mean also that. I'm being honest. That's also true. But it's not the whole thing. The whole thing is that sitting here on this floor, being in this weird, impossible situation with you, it's where I want to be. Not because it's easy. Obviously it is not easy. But because you make me feel like myself. A version of myself I forgot was in there. And I don't have a lot of experience with that. Very long silence. Then barely audible through 3 inches of door, neither do I. He heard her sit down. On the other side, the soft sound of her settling to the floor. 2 people, 1 door. Sitting in the same position, back to back, separated by wood and physics, and the particular cruelty of circumstances. Tell me something, he said. What? The real reason you don't want to go back to Eos. He paused. Not the logistics, the real one. Silence. A long one. The kind that means the answer exists and the question is whether to let it out into the air. Then if I complete a 3rd cycle alone, she said, under Kelvari law, I am declared Kevinal. She paused. There is no direct translation, something like unparable. It is a formal status, recorded in family registers. It cannot be reversed. That's a stigma, he said. In my culture, yes. And your family would know. Everyone would know. It follows you. It defines how others relate to you. What opportunities are available. What role you can hold in... She stopped. In everything. He was quiet. So you stayed on Earth, he said. Not because you wanted to be here, because you couldn't go back and face that. At first, she said. At first, that was the reason. He noticed the tense. And now, a pause. He could almost feel her finding the words, reaching for the honest version rather than the managed one. Now I stay because... She was quiet. Then, now I stay because of tea on the counter at 6 in the morning, because of someone who remembers about the celery, because of a person who sits on a floor outside my door when he has nowhere better to be. and nowhere he'd rather go. He held it until it settled. You just described how I've been living for 8 months, he said. I know, she said. I noticed. And something in the way she said I noticed that opened something in him gently, in the way of something that has been under pressure for a long time and finally finds a seam, not breaking, just opening. I noticed too, he said. And that was all. That was the whole thing said in those 3 words. Everything he had been not examining, not naming, not looking at directly for 8 months. I noticed too. Past tense, present tense, both at once. On the other side of the door, a sound, not words, something softer, something that moved through the wood and arrived in his chest and stayed there. They sat like that, back-to-back door between them, the apartment quiet around them. Outside, Seattle moved through its evening. Lights came on in the buildings across the street. Someone's music drifted up from below, muffled and warm. The rain had finally stopped, and in the silence after rain, the city sounded cleaner, like something beginning. His phone buzzed. A message from Dot. How is she? He typed back. Better, I think. A pause, then, how are you? He thought about it. He thought about the phone call, the history, the 1-to-1 odds. He typed, I'll let you know when I figure it out. Her reply came fast for Dot. Good answer. There's cobbler on my counter. Take it. I made too much on purpose. He almost laughed. He looked at Sarah's door. Hey, he said. Dot made cobbler. A pause. What is cobbler? Sarah said. Something that is going to change your life. Another pause. Longer. And then something he had not heard in 8 days. Something muffled by wood and distance and everything between them. Her laugh, quiet and real and entirely unexpected. And the sound of it moved through him like light through water, like the first clear thing after a long gray season. Not fixed, not resolved, not simple, but there, alive, present. He leaned his head back against the door and closed his eyes. 2 more days. He could do 2 more days. Day 9 arrived quietly. No drama, no threshold moment, just light coming through the curtains the way it always did in the early Seattle morning gray, and soft and uncommitted, and Caleb lying in bed with his eyes open, listening. The apartment breathed around him. He had gotten good at reading it. 8 months of living here with Sarah had layered itself on top of the 10 months before, and now he knew the building the way you know something you have slept inside of. The specific creak of the 3rd floorboard in the hallway, the way the pipes spoke for 20 seconds every morning at 6:02 when the unit above turned on their shower. The rattle of the upper left window that neither of them had ever gotten around to fixing. He lay there and listened. And what he heard for the first time in 9 days was quiet. Not the dense, pressurized quiet of something being contained. Not the silence of a door held shut against force. Just quiet. The ordinary kind. The kind that meant the apartment was breathing normally again. He got up slowly, shuffled to the kitchen, put the kettle on. He made 2 cups of tea without thinking about it, set them both on the counter, looked at the second one for a moment. Then he went to her door and knocked, twice. Tea's ready, he said. A pause, then her voice, different, still rough at the edges the way a voice sounds after too little sleep and too much emotion. But the depth was gone, the trembling underneath, the thing that had been tightening everything for 9 days. I'll be out in a minute, she said. He went back to the kitchen. He stood at the counter and held his mug with both hands and waited. And when she came out, when the door finally opened and she walked into the kitchen, he didn't say anything for a moment, because he needed a moment. She looked thin, not dangerously, but like something had been used up, like a person who has run a very long race and is standing at the end of it upright, but just barely, and with the full knowledge of what it cost. Her hair was loose. Her eyes were silver again. Actually silver. Not the storm water darkness of the last 9 days. The clean early morning silver of the kitchen on day 3, the color that caught light and gave it back differently. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She crossed to the counter, picked up her tea, held it the same way he was holding his. Two hands, both of them needing something to anchor to. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside Seattle was starting its day. A bus somewhere. Someone's delivery cart on the sidewalk. The ordinary machinery of a city that had no idea it was the first morning of something new. "It's over," she said. "Yeah, I am." She stopped. Tried again. "I am not entirely sure what I am." "Tired," he said. "Extremely tired." A pause. "Also grateful. Also terrified. Also—" She looked at her tea. "Also several things I do not currently have the vocabulary for." "That makes two of us." She looked up, and something in her face shifted. Something small. Almost a smile, not quite, but the shape of one. The outline of something that was about to be. "You look terrible," she said. 9 days without proper sleep. You did not have to do that." "I know. I mean the floor specifically. You have a bed. Better acoustics." She stared at him. "That is possibly the strangest thing you have ever said to me." "Completely reasonable decision in context." "It is not reasonable. It is—" She stopped. The almost smile became something more. Just barely. "It is very you." And that landed somewhere specific. Not painful, the opposite. Like pressing on a bruise and finding the bruise is gone. They stood in the kitchen for another minute. Just that. Just standing. Two people who had spent 9 days 3 inches apart and a universe away from each other, now standing in the same room with no door between them, rediscovering what it felt like to share the same air without physics and circumstance making it complicated. He put his mug down. "Sit," he said. "I'll make eggs." "You don't have to." "Sarah." She looked at him. "Let me make eggs." A pause. Something moved through her expression. The kind of thing that happens when a person who is very good at not accepting care is confronted with care that is too simple and too direct to deflect. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." She sat. He made eggs, and that was day 9. Day 10 was when everything got complicated again. He should have seen it coming. He had in fact seen it coming. In the vague peripheral way you see something approaching when you're not quite ready to look at it directly. It had been there since the phone call, since Vasara's voice on the other end of a too early morning, since the words 1-to-1. One survived. One did not. He had put it in a drawer in his mind, a specific drawer, the one he used for things that needed to be processed eventually, but not right now because right now there were more immediate things. Cobbler and celery and sitting on floors and making sure a person who was important to him was going to be all right. Day 10 arrived and the immediate things had passed, and the drawer opened. He was at his desk, working or trying to. The logo project was due at noon and he was 90% done and staring at the remaining 10% with the specific paralysis of someone whose brain has quietly mutinied and not sent a memo about it. His phone rang. Not Vasara this time. A number he didn't recognize. Seattle area code. He answered. "Mr. Reeves." A different voice. Younger. Efficient. "My name is Dr. Priya Okafor. I'm with the Galactic Exchange Program's Medical Oversight Division. I understand you've been in close proximity with a Kalvari individual during a physiological cycle." "That's correct. We'd like to schedule a health assessment as soon as possible. Given a pause, the sound of papers, or the digital equivalent of papers, whatever bureaucracy sounded like now. Given the unusual circumstances of this case," he leaned back in his chair. "The bond." A pause. "You're aware." "Sarah's mother called me." "I see." Another pause, longer. "Then you're aware of the historical risk profile." I'm aware of a 50% historical outcome rate based on a sample size of 2, he said, which is not statistically speaking a great foundation for predicting anything. A pause. That's another pause. That's actually a fair point. I have a math background, minor, but it comes up. Mr. Reeves, I want to be honest with you. Please. We don't have a lot of data on Calvary human bonding. The two historical cases are from very different contexts in very different time periods. What we do know is that your body is currently undergoing a process we haven't observed in a living human subject. And we need to understand what's happening so we can help or document, he said. A very long pause. Both, she said. Honestly, both. He looked at the ceiling. When do you want to meet? This afternoon, if you can. He looked at his half-finished logo. Fine, he said. Send me the address. He put the phone down. He stared at the wall. He was okay. Fine. Totally fine. He was a data point in an unprecedented cross-species medical situation with a 50% historical survival rate. No big deal. He had definitely handled more stressful client briefs than this. He had not handled more stressful client briefs than this. He got up, went to the kitchen, poured water, drank it, poured more. He could hear Sarah in her room, the quiet sounds of someone moving slowly through a space, putting things back in order, reassembling the normal rhythms of a life that had been suspended for 10 days. He should tell her. He should absolutely tell her. He stood in the kitchen for 2 full minutes, constructing reasons why he should tell her right now, and finding each of them completely correct and still not moving. Because she had just come through 10 of the hardest days of her life, and she was carrying the specific fragility of something strong that has been tested past its comfortable limits and has come out the other side still standing, but knowing what it cost. Because telling her meant making it real in a way it wasn't quite real yet. Because the drawer was open and he was looking at the thing in the drawer, and the thing in the drawer was that he might not be fine. Not dramatically, not immediately, but over time, slowly. The way Vasara had described it, a candle burning from both ends, very bright and then gone. He was 32 years old. He had a lease on an apartment with incorrectly colored kitchen tile that he loved anyway. He had clients who used the word bold as if it were meaningful. He had a plant collection he talked to when he thought no one was listening. He had a best friend currently in Portland and a mother who called every Sunday at 11 and complained about the news for 35 minutes and then said, "I love you," and hung up. He had a life, a specific, detailed, imperfect life. And somewhere in the last 8 months, in the accumulation of tea and celery and early mornings and door sitting, that life had started to include another person in a way that felt structural. Like she wasn't an addition, like she was load-bearing. And the question in the drawer was, what happened to the structure if the load-bearing element started to degrade? He put the water glass down. He went to her door. "I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon," he said. "Exchange program medical. Routine." A pause from inside. Is it routine? Probably. Another pause. The kind that meant she knew exactly what he wasn't saying and was deciding whether to say it herself. "I'm coming with you," she said. "You don't have to." "I am coming with you, Caleb." He stood there. "Okay," he said. They took the bus, sat next to each other for the first time in 10 days without a door between them, and the ordinary reality of being physically adjacent was strange after all of that. Not uncomfortable. Just present. Real in a different way. The way things become more real when the emergency passes and you're left with the actual shape of them. She was quiet on the bus, looking out the window at Seattle moving by. Her hair caught the light coming through the glass and turned it something warmer than usual, something close to gold. He watched her without being obvious about it, the way he'd been doing for 8 months. "You can look," she said without turning from the window. "I know. Then why don't you?" He thought about it. "Because if I look directly at you, I have to know what I'm feeling. and I'm still working on that. She turned, looked at him. How is the work going? Slowly. A pause, and then surprising him, me too. They got off the bus 2 stops later, walked a block and a half in the kind of October cold that Seattle does particularly well. Bright sky, sharp air, the trees on the street in full gold and amber and that particular shade of red that exists for exactly 2 weeks every year and makes everything look like a painting of itself. The clinic was small, unremarkable, the kind of place designed to be easy to overlook. He had expected something more institutional, more exchange program, more official, but it was just a building with a door and a waiting room and a woman at the front desk who handed him a clipboard with absolutely no reaction to the tall, luminous presence who had walked in beside him, which probably meant she had seen things. Dr. Okafor was younger than her voice, mid-30s, short hair, quick eyes, the kind of competence that didn't need to announce itself. She shook his hand. She looked at Sarah with an expression of complex professional interest that she managed admirably to keep just on the correct side of a line. Please, she said, both of you come in. They sat. She ran tests, some familiar, some involving equipment Caleb didn't recognize and didn't ask about because he was fairly certain the answers would require more processing time than he currently had available. She asked questions. He answered. Sarah answered some of them. In Calvari first and translating. Some things she said didn't have English equivalents. At the end of 40 minutes, Okafor set down her tablet, folded her hands. Okay, she said, I want to tell you what I see, and I want to be clear that this is preliminary. This is a data set of one. You are the first human we have been able to observe through this process. Understood, he said. Your system is changing. She said it steadily, not catastrophizing, just naming. There are neurological shifts we can measure. Biochemical markers that weren't present 6 months ago based on your last standard physical. Your body is adapting to the resonance bond, which is, she paused, which is remarkable, genuinely remarkable. The 2 historical cases we have records of show different outcomes at this stage. One showed similar adaptation markers. One showed early stress indicators that later became significant. Which one am I? He said. She looked at him. You're the adaptation markers. He blinked. He heard Sarah beside him release a breath she had apparently been holding for quite some time. What does that mean? Caleb said. It means your body is not rejecting this, Okafor said. It's doing something much rarer. It's integrating. The bond is changing how your nervous system processes certain kinds of information. Emotional information specifically. Relational information. You will likely find that she seemed to search for the clinical language and then decide against it. More. You'll find you're more perceptive, more attuned, more present to the emotional reality of the people around you. He took that in slowly. More. Not less, not diminished, not a candle burning from both ends. More. Is there still a risk of the other outcome? He said. I won't lie to you. The adaptation markers are positive, but this process is ongoing. We'll need to monitor, regular check-ins, some lifestyle adjustments while your system stabilizes. She met his eyes. But Mr. Reeves, based on what I'm seeing today, I'm not worried about you. I'm actually, a small smile, controlled and professional but real. I'm kind of amazed by you. He looked at his hands. He looked at Sarah. Her eyes were silver, fully silver. Bright as the morning they had first stood 3 feet apart in a kitchen, counting seconds, neither of them admitted they were counting. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. On the bus home, she took his hand. No preamble, no discussion. She just reached over and took his hand in hers and held it with the particular certainty of someone who has decided to stop hesitating. Her fingers were longer than his, her skin cool against his palm in a way that he had at various points over the past 8 months tried very hard not to think about and had thought about anyway. He turned his hand over, held hers back. They rode home that way, In the gold October afternoon, in the city that had no idea what was happening in seat 14 of the southbound 49. Fine, neither did they completely, but they were figuring it out, together, which was, it turned out, the important part. 3 days after the cycle ended, Dot knocked. He had been expecting her. He had actually been mildly surprised it had taken her 3 days. He had been starting to think perhaps she was giving them space on purpose, which would be very like her. She had the patience of someone who understood that some things needed to find their own moment, and that arriving before the moment was worse than not arriving at all. He opened the door. She was in her everyday coat, the tan one, which meant this was not an occasion, just a visit. He appreciated the distinction. "How is she?" Dot said. "Better, much better. Resting a lot. She called her family yesterday." "How did that go?" "Long." He paused. "Complicated, but forward." Dot nodded. "And you?" "Dr. Okafor says I'm remarkable." A pause. "Is that the medical term?" "Apparently." Dot looked at him for a moment, the steady, gray-eyed assessment he had come to understand as her version of warmth. "I'm glad," she said. Simple, complete. "Come in," he said. "She's been asking about you." Dot raised an eyebrow. "Has she?" "Something about wanting to ask you a question." They went in. Sarah was on the couch, wrapped in the oversized blanket she had claimed sometime around day 3 and had not relinquished. She was holding tea. Of course she was holding tea. She looked up when they came in, and her face did something quiet and complicated. "Mrs. Winslow," she said. Dot said Dot for what Caleb assumed was not the first time she had made this correction. Sarah moved over on the couch. Dot sat beside her without ceremony. He went to the kitchen, made tea, realized the kitchen was the only place in the apartment where he could hear the conversation without being in it, and then realized he was in fact loitering in the kitchen specifically to hear the conversation, and then decided he didn't feel guilty about it at all. He heard Dot say quietly, "What's your question?" A pause, Sarah's voice. Careful. "Your husband, you mentioned that he cared for you for 11 years. He did. He never," a pause. "He stayed all of that time. He stayed." So he did. "Did he ever," Sarah stopped, started again. "Did he ever wish he hadn't in the difficult moments? Did he ever look at the years ahead and—" "Yes," Dot said, simply, immediately. "Of course he did." A silence. "Loving someone is not the same as being certain," Dot said. Leonard had moments of fear, of exhaustion, of grief for the life he had imagined that looked different from the one he was living. He was human. He had all of those things. A pause. But he also had this certainty that even in the hard parts, even when it cost him, there was nowhere else he would rather have been. Another pause, softer. "He told me that once. I was having a very bad week and I asked him why he stayed. And he didn't pause. He didn't think about it. He just looked at me and said, because here's where I want to be. Want." Silence. He stood in the kitchen with a tea mug in each hand and did not move. "How did you know?" Sarah said. "How did you know he meant it?" "Because I felt it," Dot said. "Not guessed, felt. The way you feel the difference between someone who is trying to convince you and someone who is just telling you the truth." Very long silence. Then Sarah's voice, barely above a murmur. "I am afraid of asking for too much." "I know," Dot said. "I am afraid that what I feel is larger than what is reasonable, and that the size of it will eventually be—" "A burden," Dot said. "Yes. You think love that is too large becomes a weight on the person you love. Does it not?" And here Dot did something he had not expected. She laughed, small, real, the kind of laugh that comes from recognition rather than amusement. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "No. Love that is too large is only a burden when it comes with conditions attached, when it requires something back to sustain itself. Love that is just a pause. Love that is just love without a return policy, without expiration, that's not a weight. That's the ground under your feet. You don't notice it unless it's gone. Silence, a long one. Then quietly, Sarah said, "He told you that is what he felt." Eventually, Dot said, "Some things take time to say. Some things you have to live inside of first before you find the words." A pause. But he said it, and I believed him because I felt the same way. And that's the part that makes it work. Not one person loving enormously, both people, both deciding every day that this is where they want to be. He put the mugs down on the counter very carefully. He walked back to the living room, stood in the doorway. Dot looked at him, looked at Sarah, looked back at him with an expression that contained approximately 40 years of married life and 11 years of being cared for and 5 years of being the one left behind, and all of that compressed into a single steady gaze that said, "Well, go on then." He crossed the room, sat down on the other side of Sarah. She looked at him. Her eyes were silver and very bright, and the edge of them was wet. "I heard that," he said. "I know," she said. "You were hiding in the kitchen." "I was not hiding. I was standing in the kitchen for completely unrelated reasons." "You were hiding." "Minor concealment." A pause. "The point is," he stopped, took a breath. "The point is that I'm not uncertain, Sarah. I'm not going to look at the years ahead and wish I had made a different choice. I can tell you that. I know it the same way I know you're going to correct my Calvary pronunciation every time I try. And I know the soup on the right shelf is the one without celery. And I know the particular sound of your footsteps when you're thinking hard." He paused. "I know you. Not completely. We have a lot of ground to cover. But what I know, it's enough to know that I want to keep knowing." She looked at him for a long moment. "That was," she said, "a very long sentence. I've been saving it up. It was also—" She stopped. Something moved through her face. The something that had been there since the first morning, since silverlight in a dark kitchen, since 47 seconds of counting. She looked at him, and she let him see all of it. Not manage, not armor, just Sarah fully present without the control she spent so much energy maintaining, without the careful distance, just her looking at him and not looking away. "Me too," she said. "All of it. Me too." And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was the thing he had not known he was waiting for, and recognized completely the moment it arrived. Dot stood up, smoothed her coat. "I'll see myself out," she said. "There's more cobbler downstairs." She left. They sat, not touching, not yet, just in the same space, both choosing to be there, both knowing it. Outside Seattle did what Seattle does in October. The light went gold and long and then soft and then blue. The city moved through its afternoon with no awareness whatsoever of the two people in apartment 4C who had just decided something that didn't have a name in either of their languages, but that both of them recognized completely. "We have things to figure out," he said. "Many things. Your family has expectations. They will adapt." A pause. "Eventually. The exchange program is going to want to document everything. Okafor seems reasonable." "The apartment," he said. She looked at him. "The apartment needs to be ours," he said. "Not yours and mine. Ours. Which means you get a vote on the kitchen tile, which I'm going to tell you up front is the wrong shade of cream and the landlord is deeply unreasonable about it." "Caleb, yes. I know what color the tile is." And a pause. "It is the wrong shade of cream." He laughed. It came out of him suddenly and completely, the kind that doesn't ask permission. And her expression shifted at the sound of it. Something lighting up in her face. Something that had been very careful for a very long time quietly letting go. She laughed too. Not the muffled through-a-door laugh of day 8. This one, real and present and aimed directly at him across the small distance between them. Clear as a bell, warm as a lamp switched on in a dark room, the most purely Sarah sound he had ever heard. He reached out, took her hand. She let him. They sat like that for a long while in the October apartment with the wrong shade of cream tile and the rattle in the upper left window and the bookshelves he loved too much and the second tea mug that had been appearing on the counter for 8 months without anyone deciding it should. There were things ahead, real things, complicated things. Vosara with her watchful eyes and her too early phone calls. The medical check-ins with Okafor that would stretch into months, possibly years. The forms the exchange program would undoubtedly generate, because institutions always generated forms, it was their primary purpose on this earth. His mother's Sunday call in 6 days, which was going to be a conversation requiring some significant preparation and possibly a glass of wine. All of that was coming, but it was coming toward people who were not walking into it alone, which was different, which was, it turned out, the thing he had been missing for 2 years in a too quiet apartment without knowing what to call the absence. She pressed her thumb against his knuckle. Once. Like punctuation. He looked at her. I want to learn, she said, how to let someone else stay. I want to learn how to need someone, he said. Not just be needed. A pause. We are both fairly bad at the things we need to learn, she said. Yeah, this could take some time. Probably. You are comfortable with that? He looked at their hands, at the light on her hair, at the eyes that had been silver and storm dark and red and silver again, over the course of 10 days, and were now just the ordinary silver of a Tuesday afternoon. In October, the color they were on day 3 of the first week, when he had stood in the kitchen and made a sound like air leaving a tire. He looked at the specific face of the person who had over 8 months of parallel orbits become the most precisely known person in his life. I'm comfortable with the time, he said. Not comfortable in the sense of it being easy. Comfortable in the sense of not being afraid of it. She considered this. That is a meaningful distinction. Thank you, I thought so. You are going to be, she paused, very much yourself for a very long time. Is that a problem? No. The almost smile finally becoming the real one. The one he had started learning to read in the 5th month and still found new things in. It is exactly the point. He squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Outside, the last of the October light went down behind the buildings. The city turned on its evening self, warm and lit and moving. And inside apartment 4C on Capitol Hill, 2 people sat in the growing dark without turning on the lights because the dark was fine. Because they were both there in it. Because some things deserve to happen slowly at their own pace without anyone rushing them toward the next thing. The tea on the counter, the light left on, the sound of footsteps you could find without looking, the floor of a hallway at 3:47 in the morning, all of it adding up to this. 2 people, 1 apartment, October light going slow across a window neither of them had gotten around to fixing. And no particular desire to be anywhere else in the world.